Hi, I'm Sam from Area 3000 Radio. We're here with Setmo. Their sophomore album Flux will be due out on April the 21st. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
The first one off the bat, your debut album was released kind of 7 years after the project came into being, kind of after a long stream of EPs and singles and remixes as your main release format. Artistically and personally, why have you kind of returned to the album format so quickly? What is it providing you that maybe that's constant stream of EPs or output wasn't providing you previously?
It's a great question.
It is a great question.
We ask ourselves this all the time. Why do we do it to ourselves? No, I think we've always been huge fans of the album format. Just like when we were growing up, it was a lot more about albums, and I guess people were buying CDs and buying records and stuff. And then I think it was as it moved to streaming, it kind of went to a bit more of a singles based format. But we just love, with an album, you have the ability to kind of really explore different things, and I guess it takes the pressure off a little bit. Like, for example, for this album, we wrote over 100 different ideas, and then you kind of just choose the ones that are obviously the best, but also make sense together. And it's just a fun way of writing music, I think.
Does it also sort of feed into, because you self-release all of your music, if I'm not entirely mistaken, or something close to it, is the album format kind of more suited to self-releasing as well, or was it that there's a different kind of pressure when you're putting out your own product?
I don't think the self-releasing kind of forces the album. I think it is just a stylistic choice, and kind of this time around, I guess we spent a bit of time not writing. Like, we took time before diving into the studio to actually think about what we wanted to do musically. That was at the end of 2019. And we had like 2 or 3 months where we toured the live show off the back of Surrender pretty heavily for the 12 months prior. And we just wanted a bit of downtime. And we were like, okay, cool. Took a moment to recollect and gather our thoughts. And we were kind of going through a bunch of stuff personally, as well as the obviously exciting ride of releasing the album and doing that live show for the first time. And we just took a minute to reflect, and we were like, wow, lots changed over the last couple months. And just really wanted to like dive into all those changes and the things that had happened and write about it. You know, we didn't just want to jump back in and punch out a couple singles. We're like a lot's happened here, and we want to explore it and kind of dig into it and try and express that through a larger body of work.
Yeah, 100%. I might pick up on you mentioning the Surrender live set. That was, to my knowledge, the first time that either of you had kind of dived into live performance that was a little bit more linear, when both of you had been DJing for sort of 8 or 9 years before performing that set. How was it different? Were you able to deal with that, or did it kind of start affecting you as you were performing as well, to not have that sort of, not get out of jail free card that DJing often offers a lot of people, but it was all a little bit more linear and a little bit less responsive to what potentially the crowd was giving both of you at the time?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was one of the biggest things we've done in the whole life of Setmo was building that live show and learning it and performing it and touring it. It's like a lot of work goes into a live show. It's so different to DJing, and neither of us are like amazing classically trained musicians. So to then like pull apart our songs and try and figure out what bits we wanted to play on different songs, like, to be honest, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of stress at times. But I mean, we have no regrets. We absolutely love touring it. And I think it was probably the best way to tour that first album. Like, musically, it just made sense. It was just a fun thing to kind of explore. It's pretty fun bashing gear on stage.
Totally. Yeah, it's like kind of higher risk, higher reward.
Yeah.
So from that take, I assume you're not going to be doing the same thing for Flux. This is a bit more of a DJ album.
You can tell.
Yeah, we're not going to. But I think like we spoke about doing it again, and it was definitely on the table for a bit. But just with the style of music in this next album, it's a little more, not necessarily club focused, but a little more instrumental, a little more like groove driven. So we didn't think that was the best way to represent this music and perform it. So we're going back to our DJ roots, but we're going to spice it up a little bit, kind of make it make it a little different, a little exciting.
Yeah.
100%. The sort of the two singles thus far are almost worlds apart, especially within the pantheon of your discography. Is that what this album was about? Was it about trying out those sorts of sounds? You came beforehand, you were like, okay, we want to try and make X, Y, Z, and then you went out and you made X, Y, Z? Or was it a little bit more of an iterative process of, oh, I'm liking what I'm hearing with these drums right now. Can I produce something that I enjoy with these drums? Or where did it kind of come from?
Kind of a
It was off the
mixture
back of the
both.
live show. I
Yeah.
guess we finished touring that, and we had decided we're going to spend some time just like not touring, in here writing music. So we kind of set up the studio. Don't know how much of it you can see right now, but like we put all the synths like here stacked
shit.
up, so it's the same. It was a similar setup to what we had on stage, and a lot of the same gear.
Yeah.
We set it up so everything's like live and ready to be tracked at any moment. So we could just, it was all the music we were making was way more jammy. You know, like we were just capturing audio rather than programming in parts. And it meant that we were definitely a lot more kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It was just like, once it's done, it's there and you can't go back and tweak it.
100%.
Which is kind of, it's pretty mad. It's a great way to write.
Yeah, but the first album was probably written in the opposite way, where it was mainly just a laptop. We were bouncing around all over the place, doing sessions everywhere. There was not much hardware on it because every studio we were in had a different set of gear. Some of them were just little writing rooms. There was no gear, so a lot of it was all in the box. And then every single song on this album was written in this room, and basically on these like 3-4 pieces of gear. So there's definitely like a cohesive sound, I guess, unintentionally, just because you're using the same pieces of equipment. But also, I think just using hardware means that it's a little bit more raw. As Stu said, it's like, you know, anything that you record, it's like it's then done. You can't tweak it afterwards.
Yeah, you're performing in that part. It's like writing the filter or whatever you're doing that live, and then it's like you can do a few takes, but like that's it. You can't go back and change it, it's great.
100%. It's interesting to kind of hear that you're talking about the DJ side of music and making music to DJ with, or a little bit rawer, a little bit dancier. You guys kind of met in pre-lockout Sydney clubs, and then you have risen through the lockout laws. And now that we're coming towards the end of it, or it concluded a couple of years ago, excuse me, obviously, it seems like Sydney's starting to see a little bit of a regeneration with a whole lot of new, really exciting venues opening. Is it motivating for you guys to see dance music in that kind of place in your hometown, and kind of surrounded by all of these new sounds and new ideas that are starting to hit Sydney?
For
Definitely.
sure.
It's something we speak about quite often.
Yeah. It's great. It really, not that it's anything the same, but it reminds us of when like we first started DJing and how we met around Sydney, just playing a lot of the same venues and stuff. There's little crews and scenes, and it's great to see. And as you said, there's more spots popping up and parties. Like, it's great. There definitely feels like there's a bit of a new energy back in the city, a bit of a rebirth, which is
for sure.
Awesome.
It's exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah. Sort of by the same token, I think sort of White Dress in 2014 was the first moment of crossover appeal. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Since then, you've clearly spent time and energy at every stage of your career in championing underground sounds and playing around with underground sounds. So, you know, the Surrender Remix album, the Stamina Sessions tours, even to a certain extent, some of the mixes you were putting out. Was it always a core goal of the project to keep those sounds as sort of the baseline of what you were doing, or was those sort of all decisions that seemed right at the time, but incidentally all supported the same overarching goal?
I reckon it's maybe a bit more the latter. I think it's just
it's just like we just love.
We know what we like.
Music.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
It's never that intentional. Like,
I guess it's just a taste thing. It's kind of, I'm glad you picked up on it because it's definitely there. But yeah, it's not something we kind of like set out to do. I think it just happens quite naturally. And it's like, you know, we write music in a certain style and then listen to like a much broader style of music, especially between the two of us. And then, but I think those overlaps, and we kind of want to see that world, you know, our music through the lens of that world as well, because we kind of do straddle in between the two. So yeah.
8 years ago, you were labelled by ID as Australia's most optimistic band. Is that a label that you're still willing to take, or would you prefer that the last 8 years have changed you and you prefer to be known as something else?
You know, we're just old and jaded now. No, it's, I mean, as you were saying before, how like there's been a bit of a rebirth in Sydney, it's also just felt like that, I think, like across the scene and the industry in the music world, because everyone was locked at home for a couple of years and there were no dance floors and there wasn't that like connection through music and performing and stuff. And having that back, it just feels like there's this great kind of fresh energy through all of it, whether that's at shows or even just the music being made and new people coming out and experiencing it. I think it's great. We like kept calling it the Summer of Love, but we just said every year it was delayed by a year because something else would happen. But this last summer that we just had kind of felt like the first proper summer, at least in Sydney, for years. It was great.
And then final question, obviously Flux will precipitate a shit ton of touring. I have no doubt you'll be going anywhere and everywhere. Will the festival goers of Australia be safe from Seshmo coming back to build content again?
I mean, nowhere is safe, really, is it?
Sepmo, thank you very much for joining us.
We're not playing, there's always a chance.
Yeah, when the session pops up.
Can't contain the sesh.